My daughter thought I was just a retired housekeeper with a small pension and a bad back. She thought the only things inside my battered old suitcase were polyester shirts, knitting needles, and a few faded photographs. She didn't know that tucked inside the lining of that suitcase was a leather-bound book from 1984, a book that proved I didn't just scrub floors for a living. A book that proved I owned the very mansion she was currently kicking me out of. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Paradise Valley, Arizona. The desert sun was relentless and beating down on the black asphalt until the air shimmered with heat. I stood in front of the massive steel gates of the Obsidian House, clutching the handle of my luggage. My hands were sweating, not from the heat but from the nerves. I hadn't seen my daughter Kerris in 6 months. She was always too busy building her brand, too busy doing interviews, too busy being the self-made mogul she told the world she was. But today, I wasn't just visiting. I was desperate. My landlord had sold the guest cottage I had rented for 10 years. I had nowhere else to go. The intercom buzzed. It wasn't a warm greeting. It was a sharp, metallic crackle. "Mother?" Kerris's voice came through the speaker. "What are you doing here? You didn't text." "I did text, Kerris," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I texted you 3 times. I have the suitcases. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks, just until I find a new apartment." There was a long silence. Then, the sleek black pedestrian gate clicked open, but Kerris didn't invite me inside the house. She walked out to meet me in the driveway. She looked stunning. I had to give her that. She was wearing a white silk dress that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like the cover of a magazine, but her eyes were cold. She looked at my old brown suitcases with a mixture of confusion and disgust. "You can't stay here, Mother," Kerris said, stopping 10 feet away from me. She didn't hug me. She didn't offer to help with the bags. She just crossed her arms. "Kerris, please," I said, feeling the shame rise in my cheeks. "It's 105 degrees out here. I just need a room. The guest wing is empty. I won't be in the way." Kerris sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "It's not about space, Mother. It's about timing. Magnus Pike is coming to dinner tonight. Magnus Pike, the real estate tycoon. The billionaire investor." I knew the name. Everyone knew the name. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. "Everything," Kerris snapped. "Magnus values pedigree. He values success. I am trying to close a $50 million investment deal for my lifestyle brand. If he pulls up the driveway and sees this..." She gestured vaguely at my outfit, my sensible shoes, and my worn-out luggage. "He's going to think I come from nothing. You ruin the aesthetic, Mom." I stood there stunned. I had scrubbed floors until my knees bled to pay for her violin lessons. I had eaten instant noodles for dinner so she could have the latest textbooks. And now, I ruined her aesthetic. "I'm your mother?" I whispered. "And I love you," Kerris lied, checking her reflection in the tinted window of her Range Rover. "But business is business. I can't risk this deal. I'll Venmo you $500. Go to a motel. The one by the highway is fine. We can talk next week." She turned around and started walking back toward the massive glass front doors of the house. "James," she shouted over her shoulder. "James, get out here." Her husband James jogged out of the garage. James was a good man. He was an architect with kind eyes and a soft spine. He looked at me, then at Kerris, then at the suitcases. He looked ashamed. "Kerris, we can't just send her away." James said quietly, "It's your mom." "She's leaving," Kerris hissed. "We'll call her a taxi. And James, get rid of those suitcases. They're an eyesore sitting in the driveway. Throw them in the dumpster behind the garage. I don't want Magnus Pike seeing trash when he pulls up." Trash. She called my life trash. James looked at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Maura, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You know how she gets when she's stressed." "It's okay, James," I said, though my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. "I don't want to cause trouble. Just keep the bags for now. I'll send for them when I get settled." I turned around and began the long walk down the driveway toward the main road to flag down a taxi. I didn't look back. If I had looked back, I would have cried, and Maura Caspian does not cry in front of people who disrespect her. If you think it is absolutely disgusting to value a billionaire guest over the woman who gave you life, hit the like button right now. Let's show Kerris that money can buy a mansion, but it cannot buy class. James watched me go. I could feel his eyes on my back. He stood there in the heat, paralyzed between his wife's orders and his own conscience. "James," Kerris screamed from the front door. The suitcases. Now. Pike will be here in an hour. James flinched. He grabbed the handles of my 2 heavy bags. He dragged them toward the side of the garage where the large industrial trash bins were kept out of sight. He wasn't going to throw them away. He wasn't that cruel. But he had to hide them to shut Kerris up. He lifted the heavier bag, the one with the broken zipper I had been meaning to fix. He swung it up to place it on a high shelf in the storage bay, but his grip slipped. The suitcase crashed onto the concrete floor. The cheap zipper burst open. My life spilled out onto the garage floor. Knitting wool, old cardigans, a pair of orthopedic shoes, a framed photo of Kerris at her graduation, and, sliding out from the hidden pocket in the lining, a thick, cracked leather book. It wasn't a photo album. It was a diary. The leather was worn soft from age, and the gold lettering on the front had faded to almost nothing. Diary, 1984. James knelt down to gather the clothes. He felt terrible. He started shoving the sweaters back in, trying to close the bag before Kerris came out and yelled at him again. He picked up the book to toss it back in. But as he held it, the wind blew through the open garage door. The pages fluttered open. James glanced down. He expected to see grocery lists. He expected to see complaints about a bad back or maybe a recipe for apple pie. That's who Maura was to him, a simple, sweet, uneducated woman who made great cookies and cleaned houses. But the handwriting on the page caught his eye. It wasn't a recipe. It was a formula. October 14th, 1984. Chemical compound C19 approved. The patent office called at noon. They say the polymer structure is revolutionary. It binds to dirt at a molecular level without damaging the surface fibers. James froze. He was an architect. He knew a little bit about chemistry, enough to know that molecular binding polymers wasn't something a housekeeper wrote about in her spare time. He sat down on a plastic crate. He looked toward the house. Kerris was in the kitchen screaming at the caterers about the napkin folds. He was safe for a moment. He turned the page. November 2nd, 1984, the offer came in from Johnson & Chem. $7 million for the exclusive rights. $7 million. James's mouth dropped open. He looked at the date. 1984, $7 million in 1984 was a fortune. It was an empire. He kept reading, his heart pounding in his chest. November 5th, 1984. I signed the deal, but I made a decision. I cannot let this money ruin her. I have seen what wealth does to children. It makes them soft. It makes them cruel. Kerris is only 5 years old. If she knows we are rich, she will never work a day in her life. James swallowed hard. He thought of his wife, Kerris, who refused to wear shoes that cost less than $1,000. Kerris, who claimed she was self-made because she started her business with a small angel investment. He turned the page again. December 1st, 1984. I have placed the money in a blind trust. The MC Holdings Group. Maura Caspian Holdings. I will use it to help her, but secretly. I will be her silent angel. I will continue to clean houses. I will continue to drive my old car. She must believe we are struggling. She must learn the value of $1. James lowered the book. His hands were shaking. The narrative of their entire marriage, the story Kerris told everyone at every dinner party, was a lie. Kerris wasn't a genius who pulled herself up by her bootstraps. She was a trust fund baby who didn't even know she had a trust fund. And the angel investor who had saved Kerris's business 3 times? The mysterious MC Holdings that James had always assumed was a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley? It was Maura. It was the woman standing on the side of the road right now, waiting for a taxi because her daughter wouldn't let her sleep in the guest room. James felt a wave of nausea hit him. He looked around the garage. He saw the expensive cars, the Range Rover, the Porsche. He looked at the house, the towering glass and steel structure that had won architectural awards. He flipped to a bookmark near the end of the diary. The entry was dated just 3 years ago. The Obsidian House Project. Kerris wants the mansion in Paradise Valley. She says it will define her brand. She doesn't have the credit for the loan. The bank rejected her application this morning. I called the trust manager. I told him to buy the house under the shell company and lease it to Kerris for $1 a year. James stood up. He felt dizzy. Kerris didn't own the house. He didn't own the house. Maura owned the house. They were living in Maura's house. They were eating food paid for by Maura's patent. They were driving cars leased with Maura's dividends. and they had just kicked her out like a stray dog. James? Kerris's voice pierced the air like a siren. She was standing in the doorway of the garage, holding a glass of champagne. She looked annoyed. "What are you doing sitting there?" she snapped. "Magnus Pike's car just pulled through the security gate. He'll be here in 2 minutes. Did you get rid of the trash?" James looked at the suitcase spilling open on the floor. Then he looked at his wife. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't see a powerful, impressive businesswoman. He saw a spoiled child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. "James?" Kerris asked, stepping closer. "What is that book?" James reacted on instinct. He slammed the diary shut and shoved it inside his suit jacket. He stood up, buttoning the coat to hide the bulge. "Nothing," James said, his voice trembling slightly. "Just old photos. I'll clean it up later." "Well, hurry up," Kerris said, smoothing her dress. "And wash your hands. You look filthy. If Pike sees dirt under your fingernails, he'll think we're amateurs." She turned and clicked her heels back toward the house. James stood alone in the garage. He felt the weight of the diary against his ribs. It felt heavy. It felt hot. He looked down the driveway. He couldn't see Maura anymore. She must have walked down to the main road. He had a choice. He could throw the diary in the trash. He could burn it. He could go inside, pour a glass of wine, and pretend he didn't know that his entire life was a charity case, funded by the woman they had just rejected. He could keep the peace. Or he could go to dinner. James wiped the sweat from his forehead. He looked at his hands. They were dirty from the garage floor. "Amateurs," he whispered, repeating Kerris's insult. He didn't wash his hands. He walked straight into the house. The dining room was a masterpiece of modern design. A 20-foot table made of imported Italian marble, a chandelier that looked like exploding stars. And sitting at the head of the table was Magnus Pike. Pike was terrifying. He was a man who ate companies for breakfast. He was staring at Kerris with eyes that looked like calculators. "So," Pike said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Kerris, your proposal is impressive, but I'm interested in your background. You claim to have started this company with nothing but grit and determination. Is that correct?" Kerris smiled. It was her best smile. "Absolutely, Magnus. I grew up with very little. My mother was a maid. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to build it myself. No handouts, no safety nets." James walked into the room. He stood in the doorway. He pressed his hand against the diary in his pocket. "That's a nice story, Kerris," James said loud enough for everyone to hear. Kerris turned, her eyes widening in warning. "James, darling, you're late. Sit down." "But it's missing a few details," James continued, not moving. Pike looked at James. He saw the dirt on his hands. He saw the sweat on his brow. He looked interested. "What details?" Pike asked. James looked at his wife. He saw the fear flicker behind her eyes. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how wrong. "I think," James said, "we should invite your mother to dinner." Kerris laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. "Oh, James, stop it. She's already gone. She has errands to run." "No, she doesn't," James said. "She's sitting on the curb at the end of the road because her taxi is late." James turned to Magnus Pike. "Mr. Pike," James said, "you're a man who appreciates innovation, right? You made your first billion in chemical manufacturing?" Pike nodded slowly. "I did." "Then I think you should meet my mother-in-law," James said, "because I just found out she's the one who invented the polymer you built your empire on." The room went dead silent. Kerris's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "Excuse me?" Pike said, standing up. "James, stop this," Kerris hissed. "You're drunk." James pulled the diary out of his jacket. He placed it on the marble table. It looked old and tattered against the perfection of the room. "I'm going to get her," James said. He turned and walked out the front door, leaving Kerris staring at the book that was about to burn her world to the ground. The driveway felt 10 miles long. I drove Kerris's Porsche down the winding asphalt, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The sun had finally set and the desert air was cooling down, but I was burning up with shame. I found her just outside the main security gate. Maura was sitting on her suitcase. She had pulled her coat tight around her shoulders against the evening chill. She looked so small sitting there in the dust, framed by the cactus and the darkness. When my headlights hit her, she squinted, probably thinking it was her taxi finally arriving. I rolled down the window. "Maura!" She stood up slowly, dusting off her skirt. She didn't look angry, That was the worst part. She just looked tired. "James?" she asked. "Is everything okay? Did I leave something?" "Get in the car," I said. "Oh, no, I couldn't." She shook her head. "Kerris is entertaining. I don't want to be a distraction. The taxi app says he's 5 minutes away." "Cancel the taxi," I said, my voice cracking. I got out of the car and grabbed her suitcases, the ones I had almost thrown in the dumpster 10 minutes ago. "You aren't going anywhere. You're coming to dinner." "Dinner?" Maura looked confused, but Kerris said I ruined the aesthetic. "Kerris is wrong," I said. I opened the passenger door for her. Kerris is wrong about everything. The drive back up to the house was silent. Maura clutched her purse in her lap, looking out the window at the mansion looming ahead. It was a palace of glass and steel, lit up like a spaceship against the night sky. "It's a beautiful house. Isn't it, James?" she whispered. "I'm glad she likes it. I'm glad she's happy." I glanced at her. I thought about the diary tucked in my jacket pocket, the diary that proved she was the one who paid for this house, not Kerris. She was looking at it with pride, not ownership. She didn't care about the credit. She just wanted her daughter to be safe. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Yeah, Maura, it's a beautiful house." We parked. I walked her to the massive front door. I could hear laughter coming from the dining room. Kerris was charming Magnus Pike. She was spinning her web of lies, unaware that I was about to walk in with the scissors. I opened the door. We walked into the dining room. The contrast was brutal. The room was sleek, expensive, and cold. Maura, in her polyester coat and sensible shoes, looked like she had walked onto the wrong movie set. Kerris stopped laughing mid-sentence. Her fork clattered onto her plate. She stared at her mother, then at me. Her eyes went wide with a mixture of shock and pure, unadulterated rage. Magnus Pike looked up from his soup. He didn't look annoyed. He looked curious. He was a man who noticed details, and he was looking at Maura with a strange intensity. "James?" Kerris hissed through a fake smile. "What are you doing? I thought you were handling the situation." "I did," I said, pulling out a chair for Maura right next to Pike. "Maura, please sit down." Maura hesitated. "James, I really shouldn't." "Sit," I said gently. She sat. She looked terrified, keeping her hands in her lap like a scolded child. "Magnus," Kerris said quickly, trying to recover. "I'm so sorry. This is my mother. She's a little confused. She just stopped by to drop off some laundry." "Laundry," I repeated. I walked to my seat across the table. I took the diary out of my pocket again and placed it next to my wine glass. "Yes, laundry," Kerris laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Mother used to be a housekeeper. Old habits die hard, right, Mom? She just loves to clean." She kicked me under the table, hard. "Actually," I said, picking up the diary, "I don't think she came to clean, Kerris. I think she came to stay, because she has nowhere else to go." Pike wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "Is that true, Mrs. Thorne?" Maura whispered. "Maura Thorne." Pike's eyebrows shot up. "Thorne?" "It's Caspian now," Kerris interrupted loudly. "She remarried years ago, but really, Magnus, let's not bore you with family drama." "We were discussing the equity split." "We were," Pike said, "but I'm fascinated by your mother. You told me she had no head for business." "She doesn't," Kerris insisted. She glared at Maura. "Mom, tell him. Tell him how you spent your life scrubbing floors. Tell him how I had to build this company from scratch because we never had 2 nickels to rub together." Maura looked down at her plate. "Kerris worked very hard," she said softly. "She always wanted more. I tried to give her what I could." "What you could?" Kerris scoffed. She took a sip of champagne. "Mother, you gave me packed lunches and secondhand clothes. I'm grateful, sure, but let's be real. I am self-made. I built this house. I built this life." I couldn't take it anymore. The heat from the diary seemed to be burning through the tablecloth. "You didn't build this house." "Kerris," I said. The room went silent. "Excuse me?" Kerris's eyes narrowed into slits. "I said you didn't build this house, and you didn't build your company from scratch." I opened the diary. I didn't care about the dinner anymore. I didn't care about the billionaire. I cared about the truth. "I found this in the suitcase you told me to throw in the trash," I said. "It's a diary from 1984. Kerris rolled her eyes. Oh, God. What is it? Her grocery lists? James, put that dirty thing away. It's not grocery lists, I said. I flipped to a page marked with a blue ribbon. It's a record of transactions. I looked at Maura. She was pale. She shook her head slightly, begging me not to do it. She wanted to protect Kerris's ego even now, even after Kerris had left her on the curb. But I wasn't going to protect it. August 12th, 2018, I read aloud. Kerris froze. She knew that date. What are you doing? She whispered. Reading, I said. Kerris is in trouble again. The embezzlement charges. Magnus Pike sat up straighter. Embezzlement? James, Kerris screamed, standing up. Shut up. That is private. I kept reading, my voice rising over her screams. The lawyers say she is looking at 5 years in prison. She used the company accounts to pay for her gambling debts. I looked up at Pike. Did you know about the gambling debts, Mr. Pike? Or the embezzlement investigation? Pike looked at Kerris. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. No, he said. That wasn't in the prospectus. It wasn't in the prospectus because it never went to court, I said. I looked back at the diary. I used the last of my retirement fund, Maura writes. $700,000. I bribed the plaintiffs to settle out of court and sign an NDA. I have nothing left. I am eating ramen noodles for dinner so she can stay free. But she is safe. I slammed the book shut. You told me you settled that case with savvy negotiation, I said to my wife. You told me you won. You didn't win, Kerris. Your mother bought your freedom. She bankrupted herself to keep you out of handcuffs. Imagine starving yourself in a cold cottage just to keep your daughter out of jail, only for her to kick you out 5 years later because you ruined the aesthetic. If you think Kerris deserves to lose everything tonight, hit the subscribe button right now. Justice is coming. Kerris was shaking. Her face had drained of all color. She looked at Maura, then at Pike. It's a lie, she stammered. She's senile. She writes stories. None of that is true. Is it? I asked. Because there's a bank receipt taped to the page. I held up the book. The yellowed carbon copy of the wire transfer fluttered in the air. Kerris slumped back into her chair. She couldn't deny the receipt. You ungrateful? I started, but I stopped myself. Name-calling was too easy. I wanted to hit her where it hurt. I wanted to hit her in the ego. And this house? I asked, looking around the room at the expensive art and the floor-to-ceiling windows. The obsidian house? The symbol of your success? I own this house, Kerris shrieked. My name is on the lease. The lease, I corrected, not the deed. I flipped to the back of the diary. Kerris wants the mansion in Paradise Valley, I read. The bank rejected her loan. I called the trust manager. I told him to buy the house under the shell company MC Holdings and lease it to Kerris for $1 a year. I looked at Magnus Pike. MC Holdings, I said. Maura Caspian Holdings. I pointed at the small, trembling woman sitting next to him. She owns the house, Mr. Pike. We don't. We are tenants, and my wife just tried to evict her landlord. Pike looked at Maura. He looked at her worn-out coat. He looked at her rough hands, and then he looked at the mansion surrounding us. You bought this? Pike asked Maura gently. Why hide it? Why let her treat you like a servant in your own home? Maura looked up, her eyes filled with tears. Because I wanted her to feel proud, Maura whispered. I wanted her to believe she was strong enough to do it on her own. I didn't want her to grow up entitled. Well, I said, looking at Kerris, who was now crying, not tears of sadness, but tears of humiliation. I think that plan backfired, Maura. Kerris slammed her hand on the table. Stop it, stop talking. Okay, fine, she helped me. So what? She's my mother, that's her job. She turned to Pike, desperate to salvage the deal. Magnus, listen. This is all just family drama. It doesn't affect the business. The brand is solid. The product is solid. I am still the visionary behind the company. Pike looked at her. He didn't look impressed. He looked bored. The product, Pike said slowly. You mean the cleaning line? The chemical formula you claim to have developed in your garage? Yes, Kerris said, seizing the opening. It's revolutionary. The molecular bonding is unique. That's why you're here, isn't it? To invest in my genius? I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a dark, bitter laugh. James, shut up, Kerris snapped. I'm sorry. I said, wiping a tear from my eye. It's just the genius part. I picked up the diary one last time. I opened it to the very first page. The page that had started this whole unraveling in the garage. October 14th, 1984, I read, "The patent was approved today. Chemical compound C19. I looked at Pike, his eyes suddenly sharpened. He leaned forward. "What did you just say?" Pike asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Chemical compound C19, I repeated. Maura writes here that she invented it in 1984. She calls it the Caspian polymer." Pike froze. He looked at Maura. He looked at her as if he was seeing a ghost. "The Caspian polymer?" Pike whispered. "Yes," Maura said softly. "I named it after my father." Pike stood up. He pushed his chair back so hard it fell over. Kerris looked terrified. "Magnus, what's wrong?" Pike ignored her. He walked around the table. He walked right past Kerris. He stood in front of Maura. He didn't look angry. He looked reverent. "Young lady," Pike said to Kerris without looking at her, "you claimed you invented the formula last year." I refined it," Kerris stammered. "No," Pike said. "You didn't." He turned to Maura. He extended his hand. "Ms. Caspian," Pike said, "I have been trying to find the owner of the C19 patent for 30 years. My entire industrial cleaning empire is built on licensing that formula. I pay $40 million a year in royalties to a blind trust." Kerris gasped. "40 million?" Pike nodded at Maura. "And if this diary is real, then I believe I am currently having dinner with the trust." The silence in the room was deafening. Kerris looked at her mother, the mother she had called simple, the mother she had tried to send to a motel, the mother she claimed had no head for business. Maura Caspian wasn't just a housekeeper. She was the invisible billionaire behind everything, and Kerris had just thrown her out. James stood up. He closed the diary. "Well, Kerris," James said, "it looks like you're not the self-made mogul after all. You're just the middleman." Kerris's face crumpled. She looked at Maura. "Mom, is that true? You have $40 million?" Maura stood up. She smoothed her polyester coat. She looked at the daughter she had protected for 40 years, and for the first time she didn't look like a mother protecting a child. She looked like a landlord looking at a bad tenant. "I did," Maura said quietly, "until I spent most of it fixing your mistakes." She turned to Pike. "Mr. Pike," Maura said, "I think it's time we discussed a new arrangement. Direct licensing, no middleman." Kerris screamed, "No, you can't cut me out. I'm your daughter." "And I'm the owner of this house," Maura said, "and I think I'd like my keys back." She held out her hand. Kerris froze. The realization hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just losing the deal. She was losing the house. She was losing everything. But James knew something Kerris didn't. He knew there was one more secret in that diary. One final page he hadn't read yet. And as he looked at the last entry fluttering in the air conditioning, he saw the word adoption. Kerris thought losing the money was the worst part. She was wrong. Kerris just lost her fortune and her home. But she still thinks she is Maura's daughter. She thinks blood will save her. She has no idea that the diary holds one final, devastating secret that changes her identity forever. The silence in the dining room was heavier than the marble table we were sitting at. Kerris was staring at Maura's outstretched hand, the hand waiting for the keys to the house. For a moment I thought Kerris was going to scream. I thought she was going to flip the table or throw her champagne glass. But she didn't. Instead, she did something much more pathetic. She laughed. It was a shaky, terrified laugh. She pulled her hand back, clutching her designer clutch bag to her chest like a shield. "Keys?" Kerris said, her voice trembling. "Mom, stop joking. You can't be serious. You're not kicking me out. This is my house. I decorated it. I picked out the tile. I chose the art." Maura didn't lower her hand. "You picked out the tile, Kerris, but I paid for it. And tonight you told me I wasn't welcome in it. You told me I ruined the aesthetic." Maura looked around the massive, cold room. "Well," Maura said softly, "I think it's time I took my aesthetic back." Magnus Pike cleared his throat. He was still standing looking at Maura with a mixture of awe and business calculation. He didn't care about the family drama. He cared about the patent. "Ms. Caspian," Pike said, ignoring Kerris completely, "if you are indeed the owner of the C19 patent, Then my legal team has been sending contracts to your blind trust for 5 years, trying to renegotiate the exclusivity rights. We were told the owner was unreachable. I wasn't unreachable, Maura said, glancing at Kerris. I was just invisible. My daughter handled the mail. Pike's eyes darkened. He turned to Kerris. You intercepted my offers? Kerris went pale. I was handling her affairs. She doesn't understand legal jargon. I understand numbers, Pike said coldly. And I know that I offered a $10 million signing bonus for a renewal last year. Did your mother ever see that offer? Maura looked shocked. $10 million? I never saw a letter, Mr. Pike. I looked at my wife. I saw the guilt written all over her face. She hadn't just taken the allowance Maura gave her. She had been hiding the real offers, likely hoping to forge Maura's signature eventually and take the bonus for herself. You stole from her, I whispered. You stole mail. That's a federal crime, Kerris. Kerris stood up, panic finally setting in. She rushed over to Maura, grabbing her hands. The same hands she had refused to touch an hour ago. Mom, please, Kerris begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Don't listen to them. I was protecting you. That money would have overwhelmed you. Look, we can fix this. Sign the patent over to me right now. Just sign it. I'll handle Pike. I'll make us both billionaires. We can be partners. Maura looked down at her daughter. She gently pulled her hands away. I don't want to be a billionaire, Kerris, Maura said. I just wanted a room in the guest wing. You can have the guest wing, Kerris cried. You can have the master suite. Just don't cut me out. I have debts, Mom. The investors, if they find out I don't own the house, they'll call the loans. I'll be ruined. You are already ruined, Maura said sadly. You have been ruined for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. Maura turned to Magnus Pike. She stood up straight, and suddenly the simple housekeeper was gone. In her place was the woman who had invented a chemical compound that changed an industry. Mr. Pike, Maura said, I am dissolving the MC Holdings Trust effective tomorrow morning. I will be managing my own assets from now on. Excellent, Pike said. And the house? It will be listed for sale on Monday, Maura said. I have no need for a 10-bedroom mansion. It's too cold. Kerris let out a wail of despair. No, you can't. My image, my brand. Your brand is a lie, Kerris, I said, standing up. Kerris spun around to face me. James, do something. You're my husband. Make her stop. I looked at my wife. I looked at the woman who had forced me to throw her mother's suitcase in the trash. I looked at the woman who had lied to me about everything, her money, her success, her soul. I'm not your husband anymore, Kerris, I said. I'm just another employee you forgot to pay. I walked over to Maura. I picked up her old battered suitcase from where I'd set it down by the door. Come on, Maura, I said. Let's get out of here. Where are you going? Kerris screamed. Oh, you can't leave me here. Pike, tell them. Magnus Pike buttoned his suit jacket. Actually, he said, I think I'll be leaving as well. I have some business to discuss with Ms. Caspian, and I prefer to do business with people who actually own their assets. Pike nodded to Maura. My driver's outside, Ms. Caspian. May I offer you a lift to the Ritz-Carlton? It's much more comfortable than the guest wing. Maura smiled, a small, tired smile. Thank you, Mr. Pike. That sounds lovely. She walked to the door. She didn't look back at the house. She didn't look back at the crystal chandelier or the Italian marble. She stopped only once. She turned to Kerris. I left $500 on the table, Maura said quietly, for a motel, since you'll be needing it on Monday. We walked out. We left Kerris standing alone in the center of the obsidian house, screaming at the walls. If you believe that karma always arrives right on time, hit the subscribe button. Kerris thought she was too good for her mother, and now she doesn't even have a roof over her head. The ride to the hotel was quiet. I sat in the front seat of Pike's limousine next to the driver, while Pike and Maura sat in the back. I could hear them talking low, murmuring about percentages and royalties. Maura sounded smart. She sounded capable. She sounded like the genius she had hidden away for 30 years. When we arrived at the Ritz-Carlton, Pike set us up in a suite. He shook Maura's hand and promised to return with lawyers in the morning. I carried Maura's suitcases up to the room. It was beautiful, velvet chairs, a view of the city lights, a fruit basket on the table. Maura sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, and the heartbreak was setting in. She had won the battle, but she had lost her daughter. "Are you okay?" I asked, sitting in the armchair opposite her. "No," Maura admitted. She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "I failed her, James. I gave her too much. I thought if I protected her from the struggle, she would be happy. Instead, I made her hollow." "You didn't make her that way," I said. "She made choices. You saved her from prison, Maura. You bought her a house. You gave her everything." "Not everything," Maura whispered. She reached into her purse and pulled out the diary, the leather book that had started it all. "There is one entry you didn't read, James," she said, "the last one. I wrote it this morning before I came over." I hesitated. "Maura, you don't have to show me." "I do," she said, "because you're the only family I have left now, and you need to know the whole truth." She handed me the book. I opened it to the bookmark at the very back. The handwriting was shaky, as if she had been crying while writing it. "October 24th, 2023, I'm going to tell her the truth tonight. Not about the money. The money is just paper. I need to tell her the truth about who she is." I looked up at Maura. "What does that mean?" "Keep reading," she said. "I have spent 40 years trying to prove I was worthy of being her mother. I worked 3 jobs. I invented the polymer. I built a fortune in the shadows, all because I was terrified that one day she would find out I wasn't her real mother." My breath hitched. I stared at the words. "Kerris is adopted." "Adopted?" I whispered. "Kerris is adopted?" Maura nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I was working as a nanny in 1978 for a very wealthy, very young couple in New York. They had a baby girl. They didn't want her. She was an inconvenience to their social life. They were going to put her in the system. I couldn't let that happen. I took her, I adopted her legally, and I moved to Arizona to start over." "Does Kerris know?" I asked. "No," Maura said. "I never told her. I wanted her to feel like she belonged to me completely. I thought if she knew she was abandoned, it would break her." I looked back at the diary. There was more. But yesterday, I received a letter. "Her biological mother has found us. She saw Kerris in a magazine. She saw the success. She saw the brand. Now she wants to reconnect." "Her biological mother?" I asked. "Who is she?" Maura took a deep breath. She looked terrified. "She's not a nobody, James," Maura said. "That's the problem. When I worked for her, she was just a socialite. But now she is one of the most powerful women in the country." I looked at the final line of the diary entry. The letter was signed by Elena Vane. I froze. The name sounded familiar. Vane. Elena. Vane. "Wait," I said, my mind racing. "Elena Vane? The senator? The one running for governor?" Maura nodded. "Yes. That's Kerris's real mother." I sat back in the chair, my head spinning. Kerris, who was obsessed with status, who was obsessed with pedigree, who hated Maura for being simple, was actually the daughter of a famous politician. "Why is she coming back now?" I asked. "After 40 years?" "Because she thinks Kerris is rich," Maura said bitterly. "She thinks Kerris built the empire. She wants a piece of the success. She doesn't know the money belongs to me. She doesn't know Kerris is a fraud." Maura stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "Kerris just lost her home. She lost her husband. She lost her money," Maura said. "And when Elena Vane shows up tomorrow, she is going to lose her identity." I looked at the diary in my hands. It wasn't just a record of a patent. It was a record of a life saved. Maura had taken a thrown-away child and turned her into a princess, sacrificing her own happiness every step of the way. And in return, the princess had locked the gate. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Maura turned around. Her eyes were dry now. The sadness was gone, replaced by the same steel I had seen at the dinner table. "I'm going to let them meet," Maura said. "Kerris has always wanted a mother who matches her aesthetic. She's always wanted someone powerful, someone rich, someone cold." Maura closed the latch on her suitcase. "She's about to find out that having a rich mother isn't a blessing," Maura whispered. "It's a business transaction. And unlike me, Elena Vane doesn't give refunds." The screen fades to black as the realization hits. Kerris is about to walk into a trap set by her own biological mother, and the only person who could save her, Maura, is finally done playing the savior. Kerris is about to meet her real mother, a ruthless politician who only cares about money. But what happens when Elena Vane realizes Kerris is broke? And what dark secret from the adoption papers is Maura still hiding? The family drama is just beginning. If you want to see part 2, The Senator's Secret, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Comment adopted below if you think Kerris deserves to know the truth.